Deuteronomy 34, the death of Moses. Moses climbed from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, the peak of Pisgah facing Jericho. God showed him all the land from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, Ephraim, and Manasseh, all of Judah reaching to the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev, and the plains which encircled Jericho, the city of palms as far south as Zor. Then and there God said to him, "This is the land that I promised to your ancestors, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, with the words, I will give it to your descendants. I've let you see it with your own eyes. There it is, but you're not going to go in." Moses died there in the land of Moab. Moses, the servant of God, just as God said. God buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. No one knows his burial site to this very day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyesight was sharp. He still walked with a spring in his step. The people of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses came to an end. Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with a spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him. The people of Israel listened obediently to him, and they did the same as when God had commanded Moses. No prophet has risen since in Israel like Moses, whom God knew face to face. Never since has there been anything like the signs and miracle wonders that God sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh, to all his servants, and to all his land. Nothing to compare with that all-powerful hand of his and all of the great and terrible things Moses did as every eye in Israel watched. History books. The 12 biblical books stretching from Joshua to Esther are conventionally designated, quote, the history books. But the word history doesn't tell the whole story, because this is history attentive to the conditions in which people encounter and experience God. The Hebrew people were intent on observing and participating in what happened in and around them because they believed that God was personally alive and active in the world, in their community, and in them. Life could not be accounted for by something less than the life of God, no matter how impressive and mysterious their experience was. Whether an eclipse of the sun, spots on the liver of a goat, or the hiss of steam from a fissure in the earth. God could not be reduced to astronomical, physiological, geological, or psychological phenomena. God was alive, always and everywhere, working his will, challenging people with his call, evoking faith and obedience, shaping a worshiping community, showing his love and compassion, and working out judgments on sin. And none of this, quote, in general, or quote, at large, but at particular times in specific places with named persons. History. For biblical people, God is not an idea for philosophers to discuss or a force for priests to manipulate. God is not a part of creation that can be studied and observed and managed. God is person. He's a person to be worshipped or defied, believed or rejected, loved or hated in time and place. That is why these books immerse us in dates and events, in persons and circumstances, in history. God meets us in the ordinary and extraordinary occurrences that make up the stuff of our daily lives. It never seemed to have occurred to our biblical ancestors that they could deal better with God by escaping from history, quote, getting away from it all, as we say. History is the medium in which God works salvation, just as paint and canvas is the medium in which Rembrandt made created works of art. We cannot get closer to God by distancing ourselves from the mess of history. This deeply pervasive sense of history, the dignity of their place in history, the presence of God in history, accounts for the way in which the Hebrew people talked and wrote. They did not, as was the fashion in the ancient world, make up and embellish fanciful stories. Their writings did not entertain or explain. They revealed the ways of God with men and women in the world. They gave narrative shape to actual people and circumstances in their dealings with God and in God's dealings with them. But for the Hebrews, there simply was no secular history, none. Everything that happened in a world penetrated by God. Since they do not talk a lot about God in their storytelling, it is easy to forget that God is always the invisible and mostly silent presence in everything that is taking place. But if we forget for very long, we will understand neither what is written nor the way it is written. God is never absent from these narratives and never peripheral to them. As far as these writers were concerned, the only reason for paying attention to people and events was to stay alert to God. This is a difficult mindset for us to acquire because we are used to getting our history from so-called historians and scholars and journalists for whom God is not involved or present in what they study and write. We are thoroughly trained by our schools, daily newspapers, and telecasts to read history solely in terms of politics and economics, human interest, and environmental conditions. If we have a mind for it, we can go ahead and fit God in somewhere or other. These historical books, Joshua through Esther, are radically and refreshingly different. They pull us into a way of reading history that involves us and everyone around us in all of the operations of God.